Hello, my name is Christian Paul. Today we're going to talk about some of the most common arguments that I have heard in some of the most influential newspapers, especially international newspapers, about the influence of Donald Trump in the presidential elections in Latin America. There are a couple of points that they are not taking into consideration, and I think they are very important, especially if you want to know what's happening in the region. So one of the first points I've seen, for instance, I saw the Economist with a very famous, I would say, article. Let me see, I have it right here, called The Dramatic Trumpification of Latin America. And the article basically states that Latin America and the region, they have been influenced by Trump and how the support that he has given to many of the candidates has worked in favor of these candidates. Nonetheless, there are a couple of things that the article is not taking in consideration, and it's not also talking about how the region has been developing before Trump. So let me state 2 points. The first point, Latin America was already changing before Trump appeared into the scene, before Trump was re-elected as president. This is so important to take into consideration because of also 2 specific points. First, Latin America, it's been traditionally very conservative, Christian conservative, with Christian conservative principles, which mean that before Trump arrived, we already had the illusion or the thought that this woke mentality was arriving to Latin America and was arriving to all these countries through the universities and through the international institutions. It's not the merit of Trump itself that these changes were happening. It was actually the merit of very specific people that started becoming very, very influential, especially in Argentina, in El Salvador, in Ecuador, and then later on in other countries. So the first point, they are not taking in consideration the conservative environment that Latin America had already in these years, meaning that the majority were Catholics, but there was also, or there is a growing group of Protestants. So what you see in Latin America is that when we were looking at the universities in the States and how they were pushing this woke mentality, we were having the feeling of resistance. Why? Because we felt that through Supreme Courts or constitutional courts or just presidents, they were pushing this agenda into the legal systems of our country, and the majority of people are and were against, for instance, abortion, against gender ideology, against the change of genders in children, against communism, because we have suffered communism, taking into consideration that we had 2 very close examples in Cuba and Venezuela, and taking in consideration that many of our countries already have suffered the guerrillas movements and these leftist movements that have damaged and have created chaos in all our countries. So they're not taking into consideration this historical cultural context. And second, changes were already happening before Trump arrived into the scene. For instance, in El Salvador, you probably have heard about El Salvador as a very a dictatorship, a system that has incarcerated many of the gangsters, but also innocent people. There are a couple of things to say about El Salvador. El Salvador were the most dangerous country in the region, and in many years they were considered the most dangerous country in the world. When Bukele arrived and he arrived before President Trump, not only that he has a close relationship to Protestantism, but he took law in an order in a very responsible way. So the incarceration that we've seen, the incarceration has happened to many of the gangsters, and the majority of the gangsters that were living in Salvador, many of them fled. And there are maybe few cases of innocent people that were incarcerated. Nonetheless, they have been also being considered innocent, and they are some still in trials, and some cases are still being under investigation. So we had Bukele in El Salvador before Trump arrived into the scene. And second, we have Milei, this crazy libertarian president that is being loved by many people outside Argentina because of many of his specific characteristics. He's an economist. You can tell that he's very intelligent because some of the clips that you probably have seen are clips of him destroying the ministries, or with the chain, the saw chain, like in the presidential campaign, holding it. That's the crazy part of him. But he's very intelligent. He's an economist. He knows the thought behind the libertarian and the classical liberal positions. And not only that, he has very strong points of view in morality. And I think this is the point that many people embrace in the region, and how you can see that many people love him because of these moral principles. Christian moral principles that he has. Nonetheless, you can see that he is very related to Israel and to Judaism, but he is against abortion, he is against gender ideology, he is against communism, Marxism, and all these isms that the progressives have embraced. So many youngsters in Latin America, and especially in Argentina, were embracing these new ideas, not only because they were new, but because they were traditional, and because it felt like a rebellion against the system, a rebellion against the universities that were teaching the woke mentality. So we have two cases there, and I mentioned a third case. Nonetheless, this third case is not very well known because he has, I would say, probably weaker position than the two previous ones. But this is the case of Ecuador. Ecuador elected a very young president, a son of the wealthiest person in Ecuador, Luis Noboa Naranjo, and his son was elected president. So the president of Ecuador, the President Noboa, had weaker positions in all of the areas that we've been talking about. Weaker positions in economics, weaker positions in morality. Nonetheless, you've seen a transformation of his position in the last 2 years, and I would say even before Trump became president, you saw a transformation of his position. He called himself a democratic socialist. He hasn't mentioned that in many months, and it's probably he's been seeing what's happening in the region, and he's been adapting. Now Trump was elected, and now you have Abelardo del Espriella in Colombia, you have Keiko Fujimori in Peru, you have Antonio Cast in Chile, and the region is changing very rapidly. But these last presidents were elected after Trump. So, what could be the conclusions of this type of criticism? If Trump positions were not popular in the region, they would have no effect, and on the contrary, they would have a negative effect put on the candidates that he supports. But you don't see that. You have a positive effect. And it's a positive effect, not because many think, oh, you love Trump, whatever he does, and he has become the Messiah. No, because the region, Latin America, is already a very conservative region. Nonetheless, we have a very leftist position. Nonetheless, we have even priests and even the Catholic Church that has supported very leftist positions. In spite of all those elements, the region is very conservative morally. I wouldn't say it economically yet, because I would say that the Catholic Church was very, very into supporting some leftist movements. Nonetheless, with the arrival of Milei and with the arrival of these other presidents that they favor freedom in markets and freedom in commercial relations, the youngsters, especially the youngsters, are moving towards the right. Conservative, and meaning conservative economically and socially. So it's the Trumpification or Trumpetization, how you would like it to call it. It's not because Trump became like the Messiah, it's because the region was already conservative before, and the changes were happening here before Trump arrived into the arena. And because I would say, if Trump wasn't elected, the changes were happening here, and I would suggest that it would have happened anyway. So these are the criticisms of the articles that I have been seeing published in recent months in some newsletters and newspapers, because I would say the region is very independent in their moral position, and the region was hating everything that was happening with the woke mentality. I hope you like this comment. I'll see you next time. Blessings.